Last week, we saw Deebo Samuel, Evan Ingram, Lamar Jackson, Drake London, David Njoku, and how about it, Ezekiel Elliott go off in fantasy football and help people win their matchups. Well, in today's video, I am bringing you 10 names who will do the same, 10 players who will dominate in week 15 of the fantasy football season. Week 1 for most of us of the fantasy playoffs. I'm bringing you 10 names that should dominate and help you get to the next round. All right, the first player that I believe is going to have a big week 1 of the fantasy football playoffs, that is DK Metcalf versus the Philadelphia Eagles. He's been up, he's been down throughout most of the 2023 season. Outside of his 37-point game in week 13 versus Dallas, I think most people were probably disappointed that they spent the draft capital they did on him this year for fantasy. However, in the right matchup, DK Metcalf can still pop off and be a wide receiver 1 on any given week. In my opinion, this week, that is the right matchup against the Eagles, who are a great team, don't get me wrong, but they have had a terrible secondary through all of 2023. They added Kevin Byard. It has not really helped all that much. In 2023, this Eagles secondary is allowing the 5th most passing yards per game, almost 260 passing yards alone per game. Meanwhile, no teams can run on them. They give up the 6th fewest rushing yards per game at 94. So you can pass on this team. You can't run on them very well. It's probably not a big day for Charbonnet or Ken Walker. This team also gives up the 5th most points to opposing offenses, almost 25 points per game allowed. And there is not a better matchup for fantasy football than the Philadelphia Eagles when you adjust for schedule. Shout out to 4 for 4 where we are sourcing that information. When you adjust for schedule, best matchup, the Eagles for your wide receiver, and they're allowing over 43 PPR points per game. Should be a huge game for DK Metcalf. Would not be surprised if Tyler Lockett and JSN have a good day as well. The second player that I believe is going to have a great game, and I believe he's going to bounce back. We're staying in that same matchup. I'm seeing a lot of points, but let's talk about DeAndre Swift at the Seattle Seahawks. DeAndre Swift had a really reliable first 11 weeks of the season, but in the last 3 games, he's been super disappointing for fantasy. I actually took the time out and had a look at his averages from weeks 1 to 11 versus weeks 12 to 14. You can see in the last 3 games, his carries are down, his total touches are down, his total yards are down. He's averaging just 5.8 PPR points per game compared to 15, and he's the RB41 in the last 3 weeks combined compared to the RB7 in weeks 1 to 11 combined. So we know how good he was to begin the year. It's going to take the right matchup, obviously, for him to bounce back. And I think a lot of people are going to be skeptical to trust him heading into the playoffs. However, if he's your best option, I want to give you the confidence right now to go ahead and trust him here in week 15. The same thing I did last week, telling you guys to start Austin Eckler. A lot of people weren't loving that I was telling people to do that. Eckler bounced back in a really good matchup, and those who started him were rewarded. The Seahawks defense, man, it's really fallen apart in 2023, and they are one of the best matchups for running backs when you adjust for schedule. In 2023, the Seahawks giving up the 10th most rushing yards per game at 123.4, the 9th highest yards per rush, allowing 4.4 yards per rush, the 5th most total yards per game in the NFL, and the 6th most points allowed to opposing offenses, just under 25 points per game. So on average, they're giving up at least 3 touchdowns worth of points. This is also the team that gives up the 4th most fantasy points to the running back position, just over 26 PPR points. So again, if you are looking for a reliable option, I'm telling you, DeAndre Swift is going to return some value. All right, it is time for my hot take, spicy hot, bold take of the week. And last week, I told you to start this guy with confidence on this show. We are doubling down. In week 15, Jaden Reed is going to put up 70 yards and a touchdown, putting up over 20 PPR points against the Tampa Bay secondary. At the time of recording, he is a limited participant in practice with an ankle injury. The good news is he still has multiple days to get a full practice in. I do believe he's going to play. He's already a limited participation. I also don't anticipate Christian Watson playing in this game as well. He had that hamstring injury a couple weeks ago. The only thing that heals a hamstring injury is time, and I think he's going to need more time. That's going to help Jaden Reed be the feature weapon again. I believe that we're going to see Jaden Reed's incredible run continue for fantasy football in week 15. Check this out, though. After the Packers bye week in week 6, from that time onwards, Jaden Reed, I don't think people realize how actually good he's been. He's scored more points per game in fantasy since that time than Stephon Diggs, Garrett Wilson, Zay Flowers, Brandon Cooks, Calvin Ridley, Devonta Adams, Amari Cooper, Terry McLaurin, and Deontay Johnson. From week 7 onwards, he is the wide receiver 15 in PPR leagues. And now he gets an incredible opportunity to build on that versus the Tampa Bay Bucks, who have a good rushing defense, but are getting smoked through their secondary. In 2023, they allow the 3rd most passing yards per game, the 6th most yards per game to opposing offenses, and this is the 2nd best matchup for fantasy football. They give up the 2nd most points at 43 PPR points per game. So if you have Jaden Reed, you've probably been starting him, and it feels like, you just fell on some gold. Keep riding the hot hand. All right, the 4th player that I think is going to have a fantastic week. How about Russell Wilson at the Detroit Lions? I know a lot of people like to hate on Russell Wilson. He's a weird character. The Subway commercial didn't help him, that's for damn sure. But I'm a big fan of what he's been doing this year. He's bounced back with Sean Payton's help. Remember, this is the same Broncos team that started 1-5. This team was 1-5 after 6 weeks. They're currently sitting at 7-6 in the playoffs if the NFL were to end today. And Russell Wilson, his play has really helped the team get back on track. Russell has 7 top 15 finishes this year and a quarterback 3 finish in week 2 versus a bad Washington secondary. This week, he gets to play another struggling secondary in Detroit. By the way, this is the time of the year where weather becomes a big concern, but this game is in Detroit, in a dome. Weather will not be a problem. Lions, while they've been good against the run, they have not been good in their secondary, allowing the 14th most passing yards per game, the 7th most points to opposing offenses, and more importantly, schedule adjusted, the 2nd most points to fantasy quarterbacks, over 21 points per game to the quarterback position. So you can fire up Russ with a lot of confidence this week. All right, at number 5, a player that is not in the best situation anymore. It was really fun to start the year, and now there's some concerns about quarterback play. TJ Hockenson. I know if you have him, you're going to play him, but the name of this video is 10 players who are going to dominate. All right? The name of the video isn't 10 players you might be able to play. We're in the playoffs. You got good teams. These guys are going to dominate. TJ Hockenson at the Cincinnati Bengals. It's been up and down since Kirk Cousins' injury, but, we thought Dobbs was going to fill that role. He was playing well, then it fell apart. Last week, the Vikings scored 3 points in a win. Nick Mullins is now the starter. However, even though it's a little bit confusing, TJ was still the anchor of this offense. He saw 8 targets and led the team in receiving yards with 53. Backup quarterbacks can be tough to predict, but at least we know for TJ Hawkinson's sake that he is that safety blanket over the middle of the field for whoever is under center. And the good news is this matchup is saucy for TJ to put up a huge week. The Bengals have been getting torched by tight ends all year long. So far in 2023, the Bengals allow the 6th most passing yards per game, the 2nd most total yards per game, and the most fantasy points per game to tight ends at 16.9. They are the only team in the NFL to allow more than 16 points per game to the tight end position. That's how bad this team is against the tight end spot. So you can absolutely start TJ Hockenson and expect a big game from him. All right, at number 6, a running back who at the time of recording this did not practice. Will have to monitor his status, but I believe he will still have a chance to play. Devon Achane versus the Jets. He's dealing with a toe injury, but at the time of recording this, he still has 2 days to get in a limited participation. If he plays, you can start him with confidence. If he doesn't, just skip to the next one. Or Raheem Mostert obviously is always a good play. But for those people who have Achane and you're like, oh, I'm in the playoffs, do I trust this guy? So many injuries. I'm going to tell you to go ahead and play him with confidence. No one can throw on the New York Jets, guys. No one. Think about all the best quarterbacks in the NFL. They have not played well against the secondary. Patrick Mahomes didn't play well. Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, CJ Stroud, all of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, none of them played well against this secondary. They all struggled. So in return, people are trying to attack this defense on the ground through the run game, and they have been vulnerable in that area. In 2023, the Jets allowed the 5th most rushing yards per game at 131.8, and simultaneously the 2nd fewest passing yards per game. You can't throw on them, so you got to run. And the 5th most fantasy points allowed to the running back spot, over 25 points per game. If Achane is playing, then that's enough for me to go ahead and put him into my lineup. There's only a handful of running backs in fantasy who are averaging more points per game than Devon Achane. All right, at number 7, a player that I have so much confidence in this week, Puka Ngata versus the Washington Commanders. When will Puka Ngata get the respect that he deserves? All right, I'm looking at you specifically, Dynasty community. You guys don't want to give him the respect because he was a 5th round pick. The guy deserves respect. He is a baller. He's currently on pace to finish his rookie year with 107 receptions, 1,455 receiving yards, and 5 touchdowns, which means he's currently on track to break the rookie reception record by Jalen Waddle and the rookie receiving yard record by Jamar Chase. And let me tell you, this matchup in particular could get him a lot closer to those records on Sunday. When you think about it, there really isn't a better matchup for offense versus defense in fantasy than the Washington Commanders. In 2023, they have been torched on a weekly basis. The Commanders this year allowing the most passing yards per game, allowing the most total yards per game, almost 400 yards per game allowed, the most points allowed per game, over 30 points allowed per game, more than 4 touchdowns allowed by this defense, and the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers, just over 42 PPR points. And it's not just Puka who's going to eat on Sunday. The whole team, Stafford, Cooper Kupp, and of course, my boy Kiron Williams is going to eat, who's been an absolute superstar, by the way, this year. Think about it, guys. We have the Rams, who have 2 of the best waiver wire pickups this entire year in Puka Ngata and Kiron Williams. That's crazy that those guys are on the same team and they're both just these incredible fantasy assets. Here's a list of running backs who are averaging more points per game than Kiron Williams this year. Here's a list. Number 1, Christian McCaffrey. That's it. That is the end of the list. Christian McCaffrey is the only running back averaging more points per game than Kiron Williams. In fact, in 2023, Kyron's averaging more points per game than Alvin Kamara, Travis Etienne, Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase, DJ Moore, averaging more points per game than Lamar Jackson, Brock Purdy, Patrick Mahomes. The guy has been balling. You trust him in the playoffs. There is not a scenario in which you do not play Kiron Williams this week. I don't care how small your league is. And like I said earlier, there's not a better matchup. This defense is getting torched, and that's an accurate use of that word, every single week. The 9th player that I'm going to start with a ton of confidence, he's coming on strong, Zay Flowers at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Let's hope that this game can remain competitive for his sake. But since this team lost Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers has turned into a star for fantasy purposes. Shout out to RotoViz for these splits. But on the left side, where it says in split, those are the games Zay has played in his rookie year with Mark Andrews. On the right-hand side, out of split, those are the games Zay has played without Mark Andrews. You can see without him, he's averaging over 9 more points per game, averaging over 20 PPR points per game. He's averaging over 9 targets per game without him compared to just 6. And without Mark, Zay is averaging more points per game than A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Diggs, DJ Moore, Mike Evans, Deebo Samuel, Puka Ngata, Michael Pittman. And now he gets to play the Jags, who have been struggling in their secondary all year, allowing the second most passing yards per game, the 9th most total yards allowed per game, the 12th points per game to opposing offenses, and the 4th most points per game to fantasy wide receivers at 41 PPR points per game. Zay Flowers could be the reason some people are winning fantasy championships in 2023. And the last player that I'm going to give you a ton of confidence to play is Tony Pollard at the Buffalo Bills. It was a rough middle of the season for Tony. A lot of people were starting to lose faith. Y'all know I love Tony. That was a tough time, but I told y'all to just stay strong through the struggles. The good was on the way. And in the last 4 weeks, he has been an absolute star, helping a lot of people even make the playoffs. Since week 11, Tony Pollard is averaging 15.3 carries per game, averaging 21 touches a game, over 90 total yards. He's the RB3 in those past 3 weeks, or 4 weeks, and he's averaging over 18.5 PPR points per game. And now he gets to face the Bills, a high over-under in this game. A lot of points Vegas is predicting. And in 2023, the Bills have allowed the 3rd highest yards per rush at 4.7 and the 9th most points per game to fantasy running backs. So if you have some of these names, expect a good week. Let's hope that you advance to round 2. Let me know if you made it in the playoffs. To the playoffs in the comments below. I appreciate you. Hit that like button and we'll see you soon. All love. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy. Even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.